There is this quiet pressure that can sit in the background of your life, and sometimes you do not even notice how much it affects you. It is not always that loud or dramatic or this big breakdown where you can say, I am failing. Sometimes it is much more subtle than that. You wake up, you go through your day, you do the things you are supposed to do, but somewhere underneath everything, there's this feelings that you should already be further. Like by now, something should be clearer. By now, your path should look more stable, or there should be more proof that your life is actually going somewhere. And even when nothing is technically wrong in the moment, that quiet pressure can make the whole day feel heavier. I know that feeling. Not as some abstract idea, but as something that can quietly show up when you are building something and the outside of it, the outside proof does not match the seriousness you feel inside. You look at your business, at your channel, at your project, at your offers, your body or your life, and then you look at other people who seem to move faster, look clearer, sound more certain, or already have the results you are still working toward. And even if you do not want to compare, your mind does it anyway. It starts asking questions you did not invite. Why am I not there yet? Why is this taking so long? Am I late? Did I choose the wrong path? Should this already look better by now? And that is where it gets pretty dangerous because the feeling of being behind can make you panic. It can make you look at your life like it is a race you are losing, even if you never consciously agreed to the race in the first place. You start measuring your chapter against someone else's proof. You start comparing your messy middle to someone else's polished moment. And you start judging your private uncertainty against someone else's public confidence. And the worst part is this: it feels like truth while it is happening. It feels like you are just being realistic, but sometimes you're not being realistic. Sometimes you're using the wrong life as a measuring stick. That is the real issue I want to talk about here in this episode. Maybe you're not behind. Maybe you are simply comparing yourself to a life that was never yours to begin with. A timeline you absorbed, a definition of success you never questioned, a version of adulthood, achievement, money, status, freedom, relationships, body, or purpose that slowly entered your mind from the outside until you started treating it like your own truth. And when your real life does not match that borrowed timeline, you feel like you are failing. But maybe the failure is not in your pace. Maybe the problem is the measurement. There is a massive difference between being behind and being unclear. Being behind makes you feel ashamed. It makes you feel like you already failed some invisible test. Being unclear is different. Being unclear gives you something to work with. It does not mean you are broken. It means that you need to get more honest about what you are actually building, what still feels alive, what you are chasing because it is true, and what you are chasing because you think it will finally make you feel valid. That shift alone can take some of the pressure out of your chest. Not because everything is solved, but because the problem becomes less personal and more workable. I have had to face this with Riova too. There are moments where you look at your channel and you can feel both things at once. On the one side, there is this real mission, this idea of yourself, this feeling that the message matters. These videos are not random, that they are part of something bigger. And on the other side, there's the very human part of you, that looks at numbers, timelines, other creators, other channels, other paths, and wonders if this thing should already be moving faster. That is why you have to be very careful, and I had to. Because if you let comparison take over, it can make you distrust something that is actually still growing. It can make you judge the real path by a timeline that was never built for it. And this is why I make these videos in the first place. Riova is not here to scream motivation at you or push you into some louder, more performative version of success. The mission is more honest than that. It is about self-mastery, about creating reality, about building. clarity, ownership, and learning how to create a life that actually fits you. Not just one that looks impressive from the outside, not just one that wins approval or that makes other people understand you faster. A life that feels true when the noise is gone, where your ambitions does not cost you your soul. A life where you can grow without becoming a copy of someone else's definition of winning. That is why this feeling of being behind is so important to understand, because it often does not come from your real path. It comes from a gap between your real path and the imaged timeline. You thought you would have more things figured out by now. You thought money would look different. You thought confidence would be easier. You thought your life would feel more stable. The thing you are building would have more proof already. And when reality looks messier than that, you start thinking something is wrong with you. But maybe this stage is not proof that you are failing. Maybe it is proof that you are still inside the process, and the process is less clean than the fantasy was. Don't get me wrong here. That does not mean you should use my own path as an excuse to drift. This is important. I'm not saying do whatever, everything is fine, your timeline is magical, and nothing needs responsibility. That would be too easy. There's a difference between trusting your path and hiding inside Wagyu patience. If you're actually showing up, learning, correcting, creating, testing, reflecting, and becoming more honest, then yes, trust the season. But if you're using the idea of your own timeline to avoid decisions, avoid effort, avoid commitment, or avoid reality, then that is not peace. That is avoidance with nicer language. So the better question is not, am I ahead or behind? The better question is, am I aligned or am I avoiding? That is the much cleaner one, because you can be ahead by external standards and still be completely misaligned inside of you. You can have the job, the relationship, the money, the image, the impressive labors, and still feel like the life was built around approval instead of truth. And you can look behind from the outside while actually being in one of the most important internal seasons of your life. A season where you are unlearning old patterns, finding your real direction, and slowly building a foundation that does not look impressive yet, but can actually hold weight later. This is why I do not want you to disrespect the invisible work. Not every meaningful season looks productive from the outside. Sometimes the most important thing happening is not visible yet. You are learning what you no longer want. You're noticing patterns you used to live inside unconsciously. You're becoming more honest about what kind of work actually feels alive to you. You're slowly letting go of goals that looked impressive but no longer feel true to yourself. That may not look like a dramatic post. It may not give you a clean label, but it matters. Foundations are not built through applause. They are built so the next structure can stand. But at the same time, you still have to stay honest, because invisible work can also become a hiding place if you are not careful. So ask yourself directly, am I genuinely gaining clarity or am I avoiding commitment? Am I moving slowly with intention or am I standing still and calling it patience? Am I building a foundation or am I using confusion as a real reason not to act? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to bring you back to your reality, because the goal is not to comfort yourself with nicer language. The goal is to see clearly enough to take a cleaner step. This is where clarity actually begins, not with a perfect 5-year plan, not with knowing every detail, not with some magical moment where your whole life suddenly makes sense. Clarity often begins by removing what is not true. You admit that you do not actually want to have a certain path or go a certain way anymore. You admit that you were chasing something because it looked impressive. You admit that were holding on to an old goal mostly because you had already told people about it. Or you admit that the pressure you feel is not always coming from your real desire, but from your fear of looking like nothing is happening. That kind of honesty can be uncomfortable, but it is also so freeing for your soul and for yourself. Because if you are chasing something only because it gives you a sense of proof, It will probably keep making you restless even when you make progress. You will get closer and still feel empty. You will achieve something and immediately need another achievement to feel okay. That is what happens when you build from comparison instead of alignment. You keep needing the next sign that you are not behind. But no amount of external proof can fully calm a life that was built around borrowed definitions. So maybe the next level for you is not to move faster. Maybe it is to move cleaner. Maybe you do not need to sprint harder towards a future you never fully choose. Maybe you need to stop for long enough to ask what direction still feels real. What kind of work would you still respect when it gets boring? What kind of life would feel meaningful even if it did not impress everyone or anyone out there, you know? What problems are you actually willing to deal with? Because every path has problems. Clarity is not only choosing the dream, it is choosing the problems that feel worth caring. That last part is one of the most useful ways to think about directions. Stop asking only what would be amazing. Almost everything sounds amazing in fantasy. Ask what difficulty am I willing to repeat? Building something is very, very hard, even if, especially when you want it to be meaningful. Creating is hard. Training is hard. Healing is hard. Starting over is hard. Staying where you do not belong is also hard. The question is not how to find a path with no discomfort. The question is which discomfort feels connected to a life you actually respect. When you start seeing it that way, comparison loses some of its power because now you are not just chasing someone else's outcome, you're choosing your own cost. And when you know what you're choosing, you do not have to keep measuring yourself against every other life. You can respect someone else's process without turning it into evidence against you. You can admit someone's success without abandoning your own direction. And you can let another's personal momentum inspire you without making it your own season feel worthless. That is maturity. Not pretending you never compare. You will compare sometimes. It is what it is. This is life. We all do. But you do not have to let comparison become your compass. You know, comparison is a terrible compass because it always points outward. It tells you where everyone else seems to be going, but not where you are meant to go. And if you follow it too long, you start living reactively. Someone else posts, so you feel behind. Someone else wins, so you question your pace. Or someone else looks certain, so you distrust your own uncertainty. But your path cannot be built reacting to everyone else's timeline. It has to be built from your values, your season, your capacity, your responsibilities, your truth, and the direction you are actually choosing. So, if this message here is hitting something in you, stay with the self mastery playlist. Not as some random motivation, but as place you can come back to when your mind gets loud. There are episodes about needing more truth, building new days, starting over, escaping yourself, and nobody is coming to save you. They all connect to this one thing here. Because if you want life that feels true, you need more than ambition. You need the ability to pause, look honestly, and ask whether the path you are chasing is actually yours. So use the playlist like some kind of mirror if you want to. Come back when you need clarity, not just when you already feel inspired. And practically, I would keep this simple. Take 1 hour this week and write down 3 things. First of all, what am I chasing because I truly want it? The second thing is, what am I chasing because I feel pressure to prove myself? And the third question is, what is one next step that would make my life more honest, even if it does not make it look more impressive immediately? That last question matters the most because the honest next step is not always the flashy one. Sometimes it is continuing quietly, you know? Sometimes it is letting go of a path that no longer fits. And sometimes it is committing to one direction for a season instead of constantly comparing. That is where you begin. Not by judging your life against the timeline you never consciously choose, not by forcing yourself to catch up to a version of success you never defined, and not by panicking because your path is still forming. You begin by telling the truth about what direction still feels alive. Then you take one step in that direction. Smart but honest. And that step matters more than another week of anxious comparison. Because you are not here to live a life that only looks successful. You are here to build a life that feels true. Otherwise, you wouldn't watch those videos. So I know this about you. That is the deeper mission behind Riova. To master yourself, yes, but also to understand yourself. To build discipline but not lose your soul. To grow but not become a copy of someone else's definition of success. To become stronger, clearer, and more honest, one decision, one day, one episode at the time. So if you feel behind right now, breathe for a second. Maybe you are not late. Maybe you are not failing. Maybe you are just measuring yourself against the wrong life. Come back to your own path and ask better questions. Choose a clearer direction. Take one honest step. And if you want to stay in this process, open the next video in the self mastery playlist somewhere here on the screen and keep going. Use it as clarity, not direction, because the goal is not to catch up to someone else's timeline. The goal is to build a life that can actually recognize as yours.